another session in the studio. I'm today doing a video which is one of a two-part series. The first part is going to be what we're looking at right now, which is me showing you the chain that I use to record synths into my setup, which is all the gear that you're seeing here, which is the outboard gear that I rely on pretty heavily. And then the second part of this video is going to be me recreating that chain with plugins, because I've been reading your comments and I've gotten the feedback like, hey, the stuff you're showing us is cool, but it's way out of my league price-wise, so I don't know how I'm going to get all that gear together, etc. And I fully understand that. I can totally relate. So I'm lucky right now that I can afford this stuff, but I have also been in the situation where having outboard gear wasn't even an option. And I've realized that I found some plugins that get really close. So we're going to look at that in the second part of this video. And for the first part of this video, we are going to check out the outboard gear. And let me give you an idea of what I use and how it sounds and what it does. So right now we're listening to the subharmonicon. And basically any signal that comes into the PC is hitting this lunchbox here, which is a clone from Midas, which is basically the 500 module format that API came up with in the 70s. They used to slot into consoles. Now we use them as little bits of modular outboard. After that, it hits the tweakers, which are down here, which are some very interesting Swiss knife compressors that we're going to look at. They can do pretty much everything, but they are VCA, they're solid state, so they don't have tubes in them, which is why I have these guys, which are tube EQs, again by Clark Technic, which can add a bit of vibe and tube mojo if you need it for a certain sound. Okay, so what do we have, what's going on here, and what is it doing or actually taking away from the sound, which was one of my big realizations. It doesn't necessarily have to be about just adding to a sound before you record it. It can also be about cleaning it up. And that is very much what I use these for. So this is the louder than liftoff chop shop. These exist in software also, which I'm going to be showing in the second video. It's done by Plugin Alliance. And what they have is a high cut filter, which I think sounds really, really nice. And it's a great way to clean up a sound before you record it. You can shift the frequency up and down, so you can reach further down. Then it has a low cut, which is resonant. So let me bring the bass into that sound. Oh yeah. And if I put up the resonance and I sweep up again, I can basically find the sweet spot and say, I don't want that much resonance, I don't want any resonance, I want a lot of resonance, I want to give that some character. And then the final element is a tilting EQ, which basically takes the focus of your sound more towards the bass or towards the highs. And just with those simple controls, I found you can tune a sound to a point where really it's like, yeah, wow, let me take this stuff out. So that's the clean sound as it comes in. And this is the sound, I would say, roughly as I would record it. It takes away some of the extra bass. It just makes it feel more compact, is really my impression. And you really also notice that when you do add everything into the mix. So let me show you the difference, what this sounds like when you do have your whole mix going. It's just taking up a lot of space in the mix, right? Okay. So that is my basic cleaning EQ when I start to record something. Then the next step is the compressors here, which actually, while we're up here, I'm not going to show this today because I'm not using that so often to record. That's a Varimood type compressor. Sometimes what I will use is also this box here, which is from Do-It-Yourself-Free, which basically holds so-called color modules, which are like little cards that have, in this case, for example, the transformer, similar to that is used on a Neve. So up here right now, I'm sending it through a type of Neve transformer, and like those little cards that go in here, they're like $100. So like we're talking, I think, really quite an affordable. You can even buy them so that you put them together yourself. So this Neve sounding transformer thing is $100, and then you need the thing to hold it, which is what, you know, this thing here. But listen to what it sounds. It's bypass now. It just adds a certain weight and a certain character, I think, that is really nice. I also have an SSL type thing in there that adds a mids vibe. Not so clearly noticeable on bassy stuff, but you notice that a lot on pads or vocals. And then the last thing that I have in this as an option is a tube type distortion. Oh, which, yeah, it does add a nice weight also and a nice vibe. So, you know, all of this is like just building mojo before you go into the box. Okay, so then the next thing that this hits is a little bit lower, and this I'm actually doing through my patch bay all analog. So let me just take you over here a bit and zoom you over. Over there you can see it's a patch bay, and all this gear is hooked into it, and basically what's happening here is I'm taking the sound raw off the synth, putting it into that little lunchbox, putting it into the tweakers, and from the tweakers they're connected directly to the Clark Technic EQs, and then taking it to my sound card. So next up in the chain are the tweakers, and besides, you know, obviously being really interesting and amazing sounding compressors, they also have amazing distortion. So let me show you some of the possibilities of what you can do with just a combination of that filter and the tweakers. Let me bring in some foundation elements also. Bringing up a little bit of high frequencies also on that sound, and now let's squash it a bit, right? A little bit faster release, maybe. Faster attack. So can you hear how that changed the groove of this sound now? We could improve that a little bit by just going back to the subharmonicon, closing the filter a little bit. Let's bypass this tweaker. That's the sound raw out of the synth. And that's with the tweaker. It just adds a certain life to it, like a certain movement to it, kind of a timing thing. I once read some engineer said compressors are actually a lot more about timing than they are about dynamics, so the feel of the music, and I'm starting to, I think, kind of realize what he meant. I wanted to show you the drive on this thing, so the distortion, which I think is just amazing. Let's take up the frequencies in the highs. Okay, and then the final thing that it hits is this tube EQ, where, for example, I could add a little bit of bass, maybe add a little bit of the Pultec trick. So add and boost and cut a little bit of bass. This is set at 100 Hertz right now. And maybe I want to get rid of a little bit of the high frequency splatter from that compressor, which is what I use, what I have here at the top, which is a cut right now at 5K. We bypass this, so you can hear AB. So it just adds character and a certain vibe, which, yeah, I love, you know, when you can start off recording a sound and it already has that much vibe and mojo to it, it just makes a huge difference for the amount of time that it takes. So you see how quickly I have options now on this outboard stuff. So I'm not saying the only way to do this is with outboard, God knows that's not true, but if you find a few choice pieces of outboard gear that you know how to manage and that can do certain things, it's really, really worth it. And for me, actually, I think the thing that I was very impressed with is these louder than lift up shop EQs, because you can, yeah, chop up your sound in such a great way with them so fast and just, you know, leave only what you need without actually messing with the mids too much. You're just cutting the highs and the lows. And also this do-it-yourself loaded with some color modules. Apparently the API one is really nice. I haven't heard that. The Neve one I can say is amazing. The SSL and the Tube, they're okay, but I think if I started fresh, I would only get the holder and then the Neve to start and maybe go for the API afterwards. Speaking of API, I've actually owned some interesting API units, so let me show you this here. I used to own this 7600 channel strip, which, yeah, it sounded like an API. It was pretty amazing. And I've also owned something called the Channel in a Box from Amec Neve, which apparently Rupert Neve had some hand in designing also. And I have to say I'm getting way better sounds with the system that I'm using now, with these compressors and these EQs and the way of tracking. So yeah, just to give you an idea, I think, of how I would suggest to experiment if you do have some outboard gear, to make sure that you track through it and really, sculpt your sounds on the way in. This was a nice comment from someone that's been watching, saying that he felt it was very old school and he liked the fact that I would get the sounds right before I record them and not have to mess around with them too much in the box, which I think is, it's a smart way to go. It'll save you heaps of time. And what I can also really recommend is, as you may know if you've watched this channel, I do have a console. A console, that's a big word. I have a little mixer. Oh God, excuse me. This cold is kicking my butt. So I have this mixer and everything is jacked into there so that I can monitor everything when I'm maybe composing and trying out different things. And sometimes I just want to work fast and I will track through there and I won't think anything of it. But let me show you the difference of what this sounds like. Right now it's being taken from the patch bay over here and going straight into that whole bunch of outboard stuff there, and then straight to the converter. And I'm actually using a converter on my interface that has the possibility to bypass the mic stage, so it has like an insert type thing, so that it's as clean as it's going to get. And only the Quantum 2626 has that option, which is kind of funny. So I'm really keeping the signal path as short as I possibly can when I record this. So this is what that sounds like. Let me show it to you in context with actually that's going to be hard to hear. Let me just show you this sound in sort of by itself for now, just to give you an idea of what it sounds like when we're recording only through the outboard without having the mixer in between. So this is the sound. Am I cutting anything here? No. And now let me show you what it sounds like if we actually go through the mixer. And let me have the kick up for this. I think that could be helpful. Let me bring this up here. A little bit out of time. Okay. Now let me show you what it sounds like when we actually go through the mixer. I've put a separate recording input just so that we can listen to the mixer. My God, it has a lot more noise also. I'm not entirely sure where that horrific amount of background noise is coming from. That's normally not the case. But in any case, right? I can filter it out a bit so it's not as horrific. Yeah, there's a lot of noise somewhere. Anyway, but I think you get a sense for... It sounds pretty clean except for that humming, which I need to check out my cabling at some point. But it doesn't have that vibe and that glue and that character. So let me take it back to the outboard gear and switch on that channel. It just has a much richer kind of, yeah, interesting sound. Let me see if I can make this comparison a little bit more useful, because that's a ridiculous amount of noise to have here. I see, I only have that channel enabled. Okay, so sorry, I'm not going to be able to do this better. For some reason, there's a lot of noise on the board right now. I have no idea where it's coming from. Something that I'll have to look at for sure. So that's not super conclusive, apologies for that, but I wanted to show you a little bit the difference between recording through the board and not. But I think generally you do sense a difference of, yeah, the groove and the vibe that this setup can add. So let me bring in the rest of the track so that we have sort of a more complete background. Okay, so what can we sort of conclude from all this? Having a few, I guess, choice bits of outboard gear that that you can work with and that you know well and that you're able to manipulate sound with quickly makes a lot of sense. And you know, this doesn't need to be high-end stuff like the Kush UBK or even the Louder Than Liftoff. Even though it's not incredibly expensive, it's not cheap. Let's put it that way. But you know, there are many other systems out there that can perform similar things. And for example, there's like a compressor called, I think it's the VLA from, I forget the name, Art Pro VLA, which for example has a really great rep and that, you know, can definitely affect the way your things groove and swing coming into the box. And then, you know, just some EQ that can help you shape the sound before you record it rather than recording at full range, I think is a really worthwhile thing to invest in, because you'll get much better sounds at source and it'll save you heaps of time afterwards in your mixing process. It's much more fun to work with a sound that already has a basic character that you really like, and it doesn't leave you the option to go back to it 100 times in your DAW and keep changing it, because you're recording it and that's the way it's going to be. And chances are it'll end up in your mix that way and it'll actually sound very good. It's been my realization that the stuff that I decide very early on, very quickly, just very intuitively with just a, you know, just a tweak of a button is usually really on point. And the longer I mess around with stuff and tweak it and work with a plugin on it for days and days and days, usually the worse it gets, the sounds. That's my experience anyway. You know, you can obviously make a good sound with the plugin, but do it quick and then just leave it, bounce it, freeze it, whatever. Don't keep going back to it and revolving around the same thing. So yes, that's it for this video, showing you sort of the recording process and the signal flow that I use. Is there anything else that's important here? No. I think in summary, you know, using interesting bits of gear, keeping the signal flow as clean and as short as possible, making sure your desk doesn't have massive amounts of noise on it. I don't know what's going on there. I have to check that. That's something new. Yeah, stay tuned for the second part of this video, which is me going to be recreating this in plugins and showing you, and I already have the plugins all sussed out. There's a couple of in there from Kush UBK. There is actually the Louder Than Liftoff is available as a plugin from Plugin Alliance. I'm going to be installing the demo of that and trying it. And then, you know, some form of a tube EQ, I'm sure we can find something. I know I have a Waves collection that has it. Probably everyone has sort of a TubeTech EQ clone. So stay tuned for the second part, or I will link somewhere around here, which will recreate this process in software. And for the rest, I hope you have a great time in the studio and that this was useful to you. And see you on the next video. All right, take care. Bye-bye.